This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
If your fashion wish list lives rent-free in your brain, you need to be on Poshmark. With Poshmark, you're shopping millions of listings from thousands of closets, each curated by someone with their own style. Vintage finds, designer pieces, and everyday staples all in one place. Search for your favorites or let the discovery come to you. Poshmark makes it easy to find what you actually want to wear at prices that feel like a quiet win. Download the Poshmark app today and use code PODCAST10 when you sign up to get $10 off your first purchase.
A Swift Kick in the Ass, episode 73.
All big changes start with a swift kick in the ass. Join the journey of lifelong friends, John Curren and Tom Stewart, as they make conventional thought bend over and take a boot to the keister. Warning, listeners may notice a force equal to or greater than needed to get your ass moving. A swift kick in the ass, living life on your terms.
Welcome, I'm Tom Stewart, and I'm joined with my lifelong childhood friend, John Curren. And today we talk about the catch-22 of choice. That would be freedom of choice. Welcome to the show, John.
Thanks, Tom. You know, it's choice is such a wonderful thing, and we are all really blessed with all the choices that we have in our life, especially living in America. But you know, if you think about it, sometimes we have too many choices. There are too many possibilities, too many different alternatives for us to consider, and it's really overwhelming, isn't it, Tom?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, what happens, I think, is when you have too many choices, you end up not choosing anything at all, and you become paralyzed with, you know, overwhelm.
Yeah, you know, and that's a hell of a feeling to have. In fact, you know, you're kind of like caught up in it like a deer in the headlights, aren't you? It's you know, you're just frozen because you don't know what to do, so you're just standing there doing nothing, and it's a hell of a feeling to have. So that's what this discussion today is all about. It's about the catch-22 of choice.
And really, John, in our day and time, probably unlike any other era in history, we have more choices available to us than ever. You know, I mean, even compared to when we grew up as kids, you know, we have so many for media. We have overwhelm on channels and outlets. One of my friends was talking to me the other day at work, and we were talking about Netflix and shows, and I got some other bootleg device that I can get free shows. And I said, you know, it's not even the ability of what to watch. It's that I'm overwhelmed with too much to watch, too much content. I got too much to read, too much to listen to, too much to watch, that I go through the menu. You spend, you know, a half hour before you find the freaking show you want to watch, not because there's nothing to watch, it's because you have too many choices.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, I mean, back when we were growing up, there were like 3 channels?
Yeah. And I was my dad's remote control. I would stand in front of the TV, switch, change it. You sit there, wait for a second, change the channel, turn the volume a decibel higher. But yes, now, you know, when we were probably about 11 or 12, I remember we finally got cable in our neighborhood, and that brought us to 33 channels, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
I think there was like 11. We had this big remote control that was not even a wireless remote control. It was a hardline remote control. It had this long, like 30-foot cord on it, and like 3 rows of 11 buttons and a little toggle in between, and you'd switch back and forth. And I can remember, John, watching the Benny Hill show, because back then Benny Hill would show topless girls, but it would come in from the New York channel, and sometimes from BBC. So it would be like on at the same time, and I'd be flipping back and forth through that thing, the buttons, just hoping to see some naked girls.
Well, you know, when I think about choice and being kind of overwhelmed by choice, how many times have you gone out with your friends or gotten together with your friends, and the plan is to have dinner, but then the question comes up, where do you want to eat? and you sit there for like 45 minutes trying to figure out a place that everyone wants to go. And it's it's crazy. It's like, damn, it's one meal. It's one meal.
Oftentimes you'll say, well, what about Italian? No, not Italian. So everyone knows what they don't want, but they never know what they do want.
Yeah, and I think that plays into making life choices. One meal is not a big deal. You're going to have other meals, but with some of these other choices that I think people struggle with, it's not just one meal and one deal. It's a big deal because we all recognize that the choices that we make add up to create our life. I mean, our life is a representation of all the choices that we've made throughout our life, all the different decisions and the different pathways that those decisions have led us to. So, if you're trying to make a decision and you have a number of different choices available to you, what I like to do, and I like to take a structured approach to problem solving, and that is when you have several choices before you and you're overwhelmed and you're not really sure what to do something. In business, it's called a SWOT analysis. It's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And basically, I would take a sheet of paper and divide it into 4 sections, and just put them out: strength, weakness, opportunity, and threat. And do that for each choice or each situation that you can envision. And I think a strength would be something good about that choice. A weakness would be something bad. The opportunity that you get for making that choice, and then also the threats. What could possibly happen and take you in the wrong direction based on that. And I think if you structure your decision-making process in that way, a lot of the times that overwhelming feeling will go away because the decision will be made very clear to you based on what you want. Tom and I can't tell you what you want out of life or what to do. That's your own decision. You have to live with that. So we're not going to tell you what to do, but we can outline a way that you can approach your choices and use it as a means of narrowing your choices, or narrowing your choices, and that might help you feel less overwhelmed. And actually, like I said, every time that I've done it, the choice that I made became very clear through that process.
Well, John, often we talk about when you make any kind of change that you should focus on one simple change rather than a bunch, trying to change a lot of different things at once. And this, again, it fits into this category with a bunch of different choices, because the more choices you have, the more difficult. And there was a scientific study that was done years ago, and it was out in California in a grocery store, and I'm sure you've heard about this, where they took like 24 different flavors of jam and they put it on one of those end caps and they gave people samples, and everyone was excited. Everyone came over and they tested it and go, I like this one, I like this one. But the thing is that only 3% of people bought any of the jam. When they put it back out for, I think they put 6, and again, people came and they weren't as happy because not as many people came, because there's only 6. So they narrowed it down to 3. When they got to 3, more people, it wasn't that they had more traffic, but they ended up turning out, they sold 30% more because there was less choices available. When there was 24, there was, people were happy that there were so many options to pick different flavors, but they didn't make the decision and actually commit. And that happens, like we're talking about, with goals. When I was, not long ago, I told you I had joined the Y, and I didn't need to because I have weights here at home and I can exercise here. But I was just figuring I'd get out. But what was happening, John, is when I went to the Y to do a workout, I noticed I was at the gym longer because I had all these different assortments of exercise machines that I could use rather than just, some barbells and a few limited options. So I was like scattered all over the place, and I suddenly went from having a very focused workout and being able to chart my progress to being so overwhelmed and having such a large, lengthy workout that I couldn't figure out if I was making progress or not. So you know what? I quit. I quit the Y, and I figured, it also got rid of that barrier of having to drive somewhere before I worked out. I just walk out on my back patio now, and it got rid of that option of choice. So I have certain exercises, I focus on those, and I'm able to track and progress them a lot better than if I had a bunch of different assortment and varieties of choice to me.
Now, Tom, so you don't think that you would have adapted to the new situation and with all those various machines? I could see it if you're new to a certain gym. There's going to be a certain order and so forth, and different and new machines that you've maybe never even tried before, even though you've been weightlifting for a long time. Some machines work better than others, I think. But don't you think that maybe you would have kind of had a learning curve involved and then settled in on those machines that you liked in the long run?
I don't know. I think I found myself straying too much away from the basics, which are, the building blocks of, if you're muscle building or strength training, the squat, the bench, the deadlift, pull-ups and rows, that kind of stuff, and getting into all kind of different cable exercises and things that were not really making that big of a difference. Let me give you an example. Yeah. If you do there's a variation on the lat pull down where you can pull it. It's a straight arm pull down that you pull in front of you, and it works like your rotator cuffs. But in comparison to that's not going to add too much mass onto you compared if you did some bent over rows. There's a big difference. And I think that I got into too many of those little assistant exercises, and before I knew it, like I said, I was like there longer, and I was like, well, I can do all this at home. Why am I paying, this extra money to go someplace that I don't really need to go? So I just simplified it. I got rid of the membership, went back to basics, and I can track progress much better.
Okay. That's good. I'm reminded of when you go to a restaurant that has like such an extensive menu, 10 to 12 pages long sometimes. It's like, what the hell are you going to eat? I mean, it takes you longer to decide, and you keep going back and forth and back and forth. And, certain things will catch your eye, but it is very overwhelming, I think. Whereas I remember my dad telling me the best restaurants had a very limited menu.
Absolutely.
But everything on their menu was awesome. And, that they did it superbly. And those restaurants were the real money makers, according to what my dad used to tell me when I was growing up.
No, I agree. I know I've been to many restaurants, or especially these chain restaurants where they come down and they slap down a menu, and it's like a book. Literally, there's probably like 10 pages in it, and you're flipping through and you're going, wow, yeah, it's so confusing. And then when you order something, John, you don't know if you made the right choice. You're like, should I have ordered that? Or maybe I should have got the chicken marmalade. It makes you question. And that's what I understand is having too many choices makes you question and actually feel regret that you might have not made the best decision. So the more choices that you have available to you, the more the guilt goes up. And also the guilt that whether I was thinking about I bought jeans a couple of weeks ago, right? And I went over to a local place, try on jeans, right? I'd get all my sizes, and there was boot cuts, there was straight leg, there was button fly, which I hate. And I tried on all these different jeans, and I could not figure out which one was the one I used to use, And I was like, this is crazy, man. There's all these varieties. I just want jeans. And that really
did the same exact thing. Yeah. Did the same exact thing. And it's in fact, I have to admit, I brought some home. I tried them on for Amanda and my wife, and she was like, those are dad jeans. Like, they're going back. They're going back.
So did she make you pick up some of the skinny leg ones, like all the millennial kids are wearing?
Yeah, but I could pull it off, man. And I'm married. I'm married, so you gotta wear what your wife likes.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I agree. It's just there's too many options out there, and I think whether you're shopping for a pair of jeans or you're going out to get a bite to eat, these opportunities or alternatives are just prevalent throughout our society, and a lot of us, uh, are kind of overwhelmed by these possibilities. We sit there and we're like, I know I'm not very happy and I want to do something to change, but I don't know what to do. I don't know where to start. And, if that's you, I would think about, something very simple and ask yourself, what makes you smile? It's a really simple kind of question to ask yourself, but what brings a smile to your face? That's going to tell you what's important to you. And when you know yourself and know what's important to you, you will be able to make better sound judgments and choices in your life. At least that is what has been true for me. There's so many different options out there that you gotta start somewhere, and I always feel like you should do things that will make you happy, not maybe immediately, but in the big view.
There's speaking of food and restaurants, because it's just such a great analogy. We go to a yogurt shop here locally, and it's one of those yogurt shops where you can go and get whatever flavor you want. They charge you by the weight of the actual cup. So you can put whatever flavor, whatever toppings, and they got an assortment of flavors, and they got taste cups and stuff. And normally what I do is I make a goulash of all these different flavors that I think are going to taste good, throw on some toppings, and then I get it, and then I'm like, oh, it's so sickening sweet. It just doesn't mix well. Compared to if you go someplace and you buy, an ice cream sandwich, right, in a wrapper, that's already proven to taste good. It's already a good combination, but we have all these choices and we think the more the better. We're going to throw all this stuff in there. It's going to be awesome, but it usually ends up tasting a lot worse.
That's definitely not the case in cooking. Oftentimes, the more ingredients you add, the more just overwhelming the tastes are, it sounds really good, but it's not. Just keep it simple, and I think that goes with the ingredients of life. I read something recently that talked about how people who have been married for a long time, when they look at other women or other men, depending on your preference, just had to put that clarifier in there, Tom. But when you look at other people outside of your spouse, that can also make you feel like you've left, you've lost something, because you're tied to this one person. And even though that person might be, the love of your life and the ideal person for you, those feelings of being like there could be something better comes in, those thoughts come into mind. I think it's a natural feeling for a lot of people.
Well, and because we're making a choice probably at an early age to spend our lives with one person for a lifetime. So it often, we might have different mindsets than when we were younger. So, I think people have found, many times that who they were when they were young and got married, they grow into different people. And, there's nothing wrong with that. That happens. Fortunately in my relationship, I've grown closer to my wife than further away. That's, and hopefully that continues, hopefully that doesn't go away when I get old. But, some people go in different directions, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's just part of life.
Yeah. I think it goes back to the food analogy. If you're just trying to decide on what meal to eat, you know that you're going to have another meal. But it goes deeper when you're dealing with relationships. When you make a commitment to someone to marry them and to stay with them for the rest of your life, that goes a lot deeper than just, one meal. You're talking about, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches the rest of your life.
Oh, it's like that documentary Super Size Me, where the guy ate at McDonald's every day, and by the 30th day he was throwing up every time he tried to eat the same food.
I'm just thinking, I'm thinking, man, I hope my wife doesn't listen to this. But when you get married, you're thinking, oh man, lobster. I'm marrying up, But I think if you ate lobster day in and day out for like decades, that I could see why you would want to look towards the peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
Well, they say absence makes the heart grow fonder, so all you have to do is skip a couple meals, and then your lobster will look really nice to you.
Oh, yeah.
Figure out some other ways to serve it up rather than the same way,
Yeah, and I'm not saying don't be committed. I'm just trying to say that I think those feelings are natural feelings, but thinking about something and taking action on it are quite another thing. And if you're in a committed relationship, then that's going to be offering a lot more, a deeper and more rooted value to you, over time, rather than just, I wouldn't go back to dating if you paid me. I'm glad I don't have to do that.
Well, one thing, John, I was in researching this episode, I came across a guy named Barry Schwartz who wrote a book called The Paradox of Choice. And he's given some lectures. You can find him on YouTube. He's given a TED Talk, and he spoke at Google. And he was talking about plastic surgery and our looks. And it was saying how years ago, you were born the way you looked. That's the only option you had. That's, and you just sucked it up, and that's who you were. But now he says that we tend to get guilty of how we look because we know it's in our power to change it, whether it's through plastic surgery or exercise or diet or clothes. We can change what our external appearance looks like. And he says that the American people and people around the world have now formed a guilt around that. So if they're out of shape or they don't look the way that they want to look, or they're not attractive, then they get a certain guilt about themselves that, oh, I should be doing more, I should be doing that. And he said that didn't exist years ago because we didn't have the choice to do all these other different things, or we didn't know how to, train the body to look a certain way, or, we didn't have the technology to suck fat from one part and inject it somewhere else. So it's very interesting.
Yeah, you know what? That is very interesting. If you look at a lot of celebrities, some of them seem not to age at all. But then again, in contrast, others, have had the plastic surgery and they look totally plastic and nothing like their former selves. But I was really thinking about how people tend to take better care of themselves. I think, especially where women are concerned, it seems like they really, a lot of them are very fit, especially considering their age. When we were kids, Tom, think about the people that you knew who were like 50 or 60 years old. There's really, 50 or 60 years old was considered really old. And nowadays it's just like, man, you're just starting to hit your prime.
Yeah, because I think about it. When I've seen the evolution ever since, even when I started training. Remember when I first started training, the gyms were split up. So it was like women would work out on Monday, men would work out on Tuesday. And then like Wednesday would be co-ed day. So women and men didn't even train together. And there was a whole different approach for women. Women didn't lift weights. They did some kind of, fat burning exercise, or they would put something that was totally useless, like those shakers, like those things that would go around your waist and vibrate you, and what has happened is now with the communication, people have realized how to train better and smarter, and that it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, we can all get great results from training. And with weight training, we see that with CrossFit. CrossFit has revolutionized, the athletes as far as, men and women are just lifting weights and training and doing a lot of metabolic regimens, and they're seeing the results, and they see that they don't get these stereotypes where, it used to be that, oh, men are going to be muscle bound, and oh, women would be, I don't want to gain any muscle. But when they gain muscle, they become more shapely and look awesome. So I think that whole stereotype and that mindset has gone away and evolved. I think that's why you see that. And yeah, we have more choices now.
It's interesting that you said that. I was looking at my notes, and you're absolutely right that the more choices you have, the more difficult it is to make a decision. And I thought that one of the solutions that I had, like doing the SWOT analysis, what that does is it helps shape your expectations. But what you just mentioned about technology and communication and about how the spread of information, how that's easier these days, that also plays into expectations, because through mass communication, you're able to see the results of certain diet, certain exercise, whatever it is. You have a better idea of what to expect without ever having to go through that yourself. We all learn from each other, but expectations, I think, are really key to the choices that we do make. Because experience is the best teacher to know if a decision is good or bad. But because of technology, because of how information spreads these days, it really has changed us in a number of different ways. We know it has shaped our expectations because of that knowledge and learning through others. It does complicate, it really does complicate the world a lot more.
When I was listening to that video by Barry Schwartz, during his lecture, one of the other things, John, that he was talking about was if they take a supermarket and they limit the choices where, instead of having, 50 different cereals, they give you 3. But they take those 3 and they give you more quantity of them, so the shelves look the same. They're still packed with cereal boxes, but there's only 3 choices. That people are actually happier. If they only have those 3 and they don't have that many, then there's people are like, well, how come I don't have more choices available to me? But when they're actually stocked and there's only 3 choices, people are happy and content, and they move on their way. And that's what his whole philosophy was, that we should embrace voluntary constraints on our freedom of choice, and instead of kind of put ourselves on a diet per se and limit ourselves. So maybe you don't. That's what I was talking about when we're trained. Don't try to choose from all these 25 different exercises. Pick 1 or 2 and stick with them and do them over and over until you get some progress, and then switch it every once in a while.
Yeah, there's another analogy, and it talks about pathways, and about how you're at a fork in the road, and there are 2 paths, and one path has strawberries, and the other path has blueberries. And which path is better? Well, that all depends. How much you like strawberries or how much you like blueberries. Neither one by itself is necessarily good or bad. It's all really based on your preference, what you like. Now, if you're allergic to blueberries and strawberries, you're just out of luck, man. You might need to find another path.
Well, think of the famous poem by Robert Frost, where about the path that diverged in the woods, right, where you took the one that was less traveled by, and that made all the difference. Imagine if you came up to that path, and instead of only having 2 choices, you had 100. What's the chances of you picking the right path?
Right.
So and I think that's what happens, and what I understand is we start to regret questioning, have I taken the right path? Am I on the right journey? Have I married the right person? Have I chosen the right career field? Have I gone to the best college that I possibly could for me.
Yeah, and I think when you're confronted with feelings like that, you need to try to understand why you're feeling like that. Maybe it's nothing, and it's just a passing phase. It's we all have good days and bad days, and we all have millions of thoughts cross our mind on a daily basis. But maybe this feeling will go away. Maybe it's lingering, and maybe it's persistent, and it's occurring over a long period of time. Try to get better touch of better feeling. Or, gosh, I'm just jumbled all that up. Try to understand what's driving that feeling before you go ahead and make a choice. It might save you in the long run. Choices, and you will make better choices the better you know yourself. And sometimes you're not going to know what the right choice is, and you have to take some type of action and try to go down that path. And experience is going to teach you, whoa, wait a minute, I really don't like this at all. In fact, I think a lot of people go to college because they have certain interests. They persevere. They get that degree. They get in the workforce and they think, what the hell have I done? And that's okay. I mean, most people who have a college degree don't even work in their field that they went to school for. It's prevalent within our society, but it's okay to change your path. And Robert Plant from Led Zeppelin, there's still time to change the road you're on. There are two paths you can go by, but there's still time to change the path. And I don't see anything necessarily wrong with changing your path. I think what's important is your end goal, and being very clear with what you want. If you're trying to get from point A to point B, there's a million different ways that you can get there, and it depends on how bad you want to get to point B, as far as the pathway that you take and the diversions that you take.
And it's that million different ways that will make you feel regret and question everything you do.
Yeah, no, I guess what I'm saying is that, you could take a million different ways to get from point A to point B, rather than just taking the direct route that that's going to get there. And what happens to a lot of people, I think, or they take so many different twists and turns off of their main route that they lose sight of what they were seeking in the first place. And I'll be the first to admit, I when I was growing up, I didn't want to. I was not a big proponent of goals. I thought, that I want to be spontaneous. I want to be adventuresome, and you don't know what the world is going to throw at you. I could justify it as just as anybody could. I wanted to have fun. I didn't want to be stodgy and structured, but that does have its place if you're trying to get someplace. Like if you want to drive from Florida to New York, like a lot of people do every year growing up in Florida, that it's just like southern New York and lower Canada because of all the snowbirds. But if you want to make that trip, you need to look at a map and map it out so you know when to get there. You're not just going to go and head north or south.
Follow your magnetic compass like a bird and just head north.
Yeah.
I'll find it. But some people do that. Some people live that way, and some people, God bless them, they are happy because they have that wanderlust that they just kind of roam, and they don't want to plan.
I have that. I mean, I have that myself. That's why every so often I have to go off and do a road trip. I have to have some type of adventure in my life. Then, because that's who I am. That's what I'm about.
To be honest with you, that's how our podcast is. We wing it. We don't structure out. We don't plan. We don't say this is what we're We come up with a topic and we have a conversation about it. John brings his information, I bring mine, and we have a conversation between two friends. And that's, on that side of letting go and seeing where the conversation will take us. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, but we have fun no matter
exactly.
what, right?
That's all that matters.
That is all that matters. As long as we're talking about choices, I think too that when you're overwhelmed by choices, it's also good to think in terms of control and what aspects of your situation you have control over. I know from working in corporate America for a long time, I felt very out of control. I felt like the organization had control of my future, and I couldn't have been more wrong. It had nothing to do with the organization holding me back. It was just the way the world was, and I just had to keep persevering and keep trying in order to get what I wanted. And I don't think anything in life really comes easy. Anything worthwhile at least comes easy. I think you have to really, if you really want something, you have to drive for it and work hard for it. But a lot of people do get kind of caught up in aspects of their life that are beyond their control. I remember when my dad was had been diagnosed with ALS, and he was not able to eat. He had a feeding tube. He was losing his strength. He had lost his voice. He had lost so many things, and he had a terminal illness. He was dying. And I'll remember him telling me that he could no longer afford to focus on the things that he had lost or the things that he could not do. He would only focus on what he could still do, and he could still do quite a lot. And I think that kept him anchored and kept him holding on to life. He didn't want to leave. He didn't want to die.
That's some wisdom right there, man. That's true. A simple life oftentimes can be a very happy life, John. The more, if you see people that have very complex lives and are out running and always going and always moving, they burn out. And they also seem to people that they a lot of times they tend to, become alcoholics or drug abusers, or they have a lot of high stress in their lives and suffer, heart attacks or whatever it might be, compared to just a simple, easy to follow life. Sometimes we like to be told what to do, and it's just easy to follow a simple direction and stick to it.
Yeah, that's true. And, and I think it's probably time that we start wrapping this up, but I don't want to leave without saying that, I think if you're going to make any choice, you should choose to be yourself. And that seems kind of real simple, and it seems kind of nonsensical that you would choose to be someone that you're not. But I think with the spread of information, with all the various, celebrities that are in our daily lives, where we see pictures, we see videos of how other people are living their lives, that does contribute to perceived choices that we have. And we look at how others live our lives or live their lives, and it can make us want a different life. Rather than really focusing on what we have and all the blessings that we have, and the life that we were born into, and making the best possible life out of that. Back in the 90s, they used to say, keeping up with the Joneses, and that was very materialistic and a way of he's cut me off.
I was not trying to shut you up. Sorry.
That worked.
You can keep on going, man. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. I actually fat fingered that.
But choose to be you is what I'm saying, and focus on you and what you want out of life, and try to narrow down your choices, and it's going to be great.
Well, we thanks you for listening. I'm Tom Stewart. That's my buddy John Curren. Don't forget to check out swiftkickinass.com. Join our membership. It's free. Get John's simple spending plan, some courses on how to change your life, and we'll always be adding new goodies in there. All you need is to drop your email in there. Thanks for listening. Peace.
Yeah, thanks for listening. Peace.